The rain hadn't stopped for hours. Xiaolon adjusted the plastic sheet over her street-side dumpling cart, knuckles numb from the cold. She could smell the storm brewing before it arrived. Heavy, metallic, electric. Business was bad tonight. Only 2 customers had stopped, and 1 ran off without paying. Still, she stood tall in her soaked hoodie, braids damp against her back, and reminded herself, "You don't need much. You just need enough to survive." Just like every other night. But the silence shattered with the sound of screeching tires. She turned just in time to see a black Mercedes, sleek, glossy, powerful, barreling down Zhongyuan Avenue, hydroplaning as if possessed. It slammed sideways into a lamppost. Then, boom. An explosion ripped through the air, fire flaring in a flash of orange and smoke. People screamed and scattered, phones raised, recording. But Xiaolon ran toward the fire. The luxury car was mangled, its door twisted like paper. Gasoline hissed in a puddle by the curb. She could hear the crackle of fire creeping toward the engine. Inside, someone groaned. She saw blood. And eyes. A man was slumped behind the wheel, barely conscious, glass glinting in his hair, a long gash blooming red across his chest. She didn't think. Didn't hesitate. "Hold on," she whispered through the smoke. "I've got you." Using a discarded steel rod, she jammed the door open and reached in, ignoring the searing heat on her arms. The man was tall, muscular, and unconscious, but alive. She gritted her teeth, wrapped his arm over her shoulder, and pulled. Every movement felt like lifting a deadweight corpse. But she dragged him out, inch by inch, collapsing on the pavement just as another explosion rocked the car, sending a wheel flying into the lamppost. People gasped. Cameras clicked. She hovered over the stranger, checking his pulse. "You're safe now," she whispered, brushing blood from his cheek. His eyes fluttered open. Dark. Piercing. Mysterious. He stared at her, not in confusion, but with something else, like recognition. Then he murmured, barely audible over the sirens in the distance, "Jean," and blacked out. By the time the paramedics arrived, Xiaolon had already disappeared into the shadows, hoodie pulled over her head, dumpling cart abandoned. The next morning, the news broke across every screen in the city. Breaking: billionaire CEO Jean Rouet critically injured in fiery crash, saved by unknown girl. Xiaolon stared at the small TV in her grandmother's apartment. "Billionaire," she whispered, stunned. "That man." The screen flashed with his photo, sharp jawline, jet black hair, famously reclusive heir to the Rouet international empire. The man she'd pulled from fire with her bare hands. Her hands trembled. Her grandmother, blind in one eye, sipped her tea. "You saved someone important, didn't you?" Xiaolon smiled faintly. "I didn't know who he was. Doesn't matter. You saved him anyway. That's what your father would have done." But the next blow came quickly. Paparazzi found her dumpling cart. A blurry video clip surfaced online of her pulling Jean Rouet from the wreckage. And the rumors started. Gold digger alert. Street girl staged it to meet the CEO. Where did she come from? Why did she vanish? Watch how she touches his face. See that? Manipulative. Online trolls tore her apart. Her name, her face, her cart. All dragged through the dirt. Her customers disappeared. Her stall was defaced with spray paint. CEO Hunter. Xiaolon stood before the mess, heart sinking. So this was what kindness got you. She decided to go to the hospital. Not to defend herself, but to see for herself. Was he okay? The hospital security blocked her path. "No visitors," the guard barked. "I'm not," she hesitated. "I just wanted to check if he's awake." The elevator doors behind them opened. Out walked Jean Rouet, in a wheelchair, flanked by bodyguards. White bandages wrapped his head, but his gaze was sharp. His eyes locked onto her instantly. The crowd of reporters turned. "That's her," someone yelled. "The dumpling girl." Cameras clicked. Shutters fired. Xiaolon froze. Jean Rouet rolled forward, past the guards. And then, he stood. Despite the pain, despite the blood still drying on his collar, he walked toward her. The crowd fell silent. He stopped in front of her. She lowered her eyes, humiliated. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she whispered. But instead of accusing her, he knelt, right there, in front of everyone, on bruised knees, in blood-stained clothes. "I'm alive because of you," he said softly. "And one day, I will repay you." Gasps spread like wildfire. Xiaolan's eyes widened. "No, you don't have to." But he looked up, eyes burning. "I want to." The media dubbed her Fire Angel. But Xiaolan didn't feel like a savior. She sat on the back steps of her apartment building, peeling tape off a bruised hand as her phone vibrated nonstop. News vans loomed outside the alley, like vultures. Strangers had messaged her everything from marriage proposals to death threats. She had become a trending topic for all the wrong reasons. Girl from the slums saves Jean Rui, China's coldest billionaire. Was it planned? Does she know him? From dumplings to diamonds, how long before she cashes in? Xiaolan dropped her phone in the dirt and leaned her head against the wall. She hadn't slept. Her grandmother was frightened. Their doorbell had rung 3 times the night before. She no longer felt safe in her own home. And then, as if summoned by a twist of fate, a long black car pulled into the alley. The door opened. "Miss Xiaolan." A suited man stepped out, expression unreadable. "Mr. Jean requests your presence. He says it's urgent." She hesitated. And then, against every instinct, she stood. Rue Villa, outskirts of the city. The car passed through 2 steel gates and a sprawling bamboo forest before reaching the private estate. The mansion stood like a fortress, modern glass walls, black marble steps, and silence so heavy it made her ears ring. She was led inside. She expected gold chandeliers, grand halls. But the room he brought her to was warm, understated. Bookshelves lined one side. A koi pond ran beneath the glass floor. And there, seated by the window in a gray silk robe, was Jean Rui. His head was bandaged, one arm in a sling. But his presence was still sharp, commanding, quietly dangerous. He looked up, and for a second, his cool expression softened. "I'm glad you came." "I didn't know if I should," Xiaolan replied cautiously. "The cameras haven't left my street for 3 days." He nodded slowly. "I know. I should have stepped in sooner. I wasn't thinking clearly." She folded her arms. "You seemed pretty clear when you knelt in front of reporters." "That wasn't for them." He stood slowly. "It was for you." He moved closer, and for the first time, Xiaolan noticed how tall he was. How every step felt measured, controlled, like a man used to owning every room he entered. But she didn't step back. He stopped inches from her. "You ran into a burning car for a stranger, risked your life, and you vanished before anyone could thank you. Why?" "I didn't know who you were," she said, voice steady. "And I didn't care. I just saw a man dying." He stared at her like he'd never met someone like her before. "I want to offer you protection." "For a while," he said. "My world is not kind. And now you're in it." She shook her head. "I don't want your money." "I didn't offer money." "Then what are you offering?" Silence stretched between them. Finally, he said, "A place where no one will harass you. No cameras. No lies. Just until the headlines die down." Xiaolan studied him. "Why me? Why not just let it fade?" He hesitated. Then, "Because the moment I opened my eyes, I remembered your face. And for once, I didn't feel like a CEO. I felt human." She should have said no. She didn't belong in his world. But when she returned home that night, her dumpling cart was smashed to pieces. Her grandma's tea shop had "Liar" painted across the door. So the next morning she said yes. A week later, Rue Villa. Xiaolan moved in quietly. She kept to herself, cooking meals for the old gardener, practicing her Kungfu alone in the early dawn. She didn't know Jean Rui watched her every morning from his office window. One evening, she caught him. "You always spy on your guests?" she asked. He didn't flinch. "Only the ones who move like warriors." She laughed, light, surprising him. "You don't seem like someone who laughs much." He tilted his head. "You don't seem like someone who hides much." I've had practice. He was about to respond when his assistant burst in, phone in hand. Sir, it's urgent. There's a leak. Jean Rouet read the screen. His jaw clenched. What is it? Xiaolon asked. His eyes darkened. Someone's leaked security footage of the crash. They edited it. Made it look like you pushed me. Her breath caught. What? It's a setup. Someone wants to destroy you. She took a step back. Why would anyone go this far? He stared at her, voice low. Because I wasn't supposed to survive that crash. The tension between them wasn't just in the air, it was electric. Jean Rouet stood at the edge of his office, backlit by the gray skyline of the city, his reflection fractured across the glass wall. Behind him, Xiaolon watched in silence, arms folded as the news segment repeated on the muted TV, a slowed-down, edited version of the crash. In the video, it looked like she'd shoved him into the car moments before it exploded. A clean, vicious lie. I don't understand, she said at last, her voice low. Why would anyone fake something so cruel? He didn't turn around. Because they needed a scapegoat. And because I was supposed to die that night. Silence. She stepped closer. You said that before. But you never explained. Now he turned, his eyes like ice cut from stone. I've been trying to clean the rot out of Rouet International for a year. There are people on my board who want me gone permanently. I was going to expose them. And the crash was their way of making sure I never got the chance. Xiaolan's throat tightened. So they framed me to bury the real crime. He nodded. Then go public with the truth, she urged. Tell them what really happened. They won't believe me without proof. And I won't risk putting you in deeper danger until I have it. Her gaze burned. I can take care of myself. I know, he said quietly. That's what terrifies me. She flinched, startled by the admission. He stepped forward. The sharpness in his face softened. I saw what you did in that alley. You didn't hesitate. You didn't think about your own safety. You just acted. Xiaolon dropped her gaze, heart beating too fast. It's what anyone would have done. No, Jean Rouet said. It's what a hero does. Their eyes locked. And in that silent moment, something passed between them, fierce and unspoken. That night, sleep eluded her. Xiaolon stood on the rooftop terrace, wind tugging at her braid, moonlight spilling across the tiles. The city lights shimmered like broken glass below. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. You always show up when I need quiet, she said softly. Jean Rouet joined her at the railing. And you always show up where no one else dares to be. She glanced at him. Is that a compliment? It's an admission, he replied, voice thick with emotion. You don't belong in my world, Xiaolon. But the moment you stepped into it, everything changed. Her chest tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat. He looked out across the horizon. When I was younger, I thought power meant isolation. That strength required distance. But when I woke up in that ambulance, all I could think of was the girl with ash on her face and fire in her eyes. She turned toward him, slowly. You make it sound like I did more than drag you out of a burning car. You did, he said simply. You reminded me what it means to live. She looked away, unsettled by the vulnerability in his voice. Then, I used to fight in underground rings, she confessed, voice nearly a whisper. Not for glory. For rent money. For my grandmother's medicine. I never expected my fists would save a billionaire. He looked at her with something bordering awe. Then maybe fate had bigger plans. She laughed bitterly. Fate doesn't look twice at people like me. Maybe it just did, he said. Their eyes met again, longer this time. The wind stirred. And for a brief second, Jean Rouet stepped forward, his hand brushing hers. She froze. But before the moment could deepen, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. They raced to the hallway. Security alarms blared. A guard sprinted into view, bleeding from the shoulder. Someone breached the eastern wing, he gasped. They're armed. Stay here, Jean Rouet told her. No, Xiaolon said. I'm going with you. He opened his mouth to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him cold. Together, they moved through the dim halls like two shadows. She moved with practiced silence, her stance shifting, calculated, prepared. Jean Rouet glanced at her. You really were trained. I told you. I'm not fragile. And then they turned the corner, just as a masked man raised a gun at them. Without hesitation, Xiao Lan lunged. In one smooth motion, she kicked the weapon from his hand, spun, and slammed him against the wall with a sweep of her leg. He collapsed unconscious. Jean Rouet stared at her, stunned. I thought you said underground fights, he breathed. I didn't say I lost them, she said. Rain fell in cold sheets over Rouet Villa as the night wore on, washing blood from the marble floors and silence into the hallways. Xiao Lan sat on the edge of the couch, her hands still trembling slightly. Across from her, Jean Rouet stood like a statue, eyes locked on the unconscious intruder now zip-tied and guarded in the foyer. Professional, Jean muttered. Military-grade boots. Mute comms. Came in clean, went for the east corridor. That's not a random break-in. Xiao Lan's brows furrowed. So, what's in the east wing? Jean hesitated. She stood. Don't lie to me. Not now. He exhaled slowly, then met her eyes. My father's archive. Hard drives. Company files. Old family records. She took a step closer. Does it have proof of the crash plot? His jaw flexed, silent. That was all the answer she needed. You knew they might try again. And you didn't move the evidence? She asked, voice low but sharp. I wanted them to come, Jean said, so I could catch them. She stared at him, stunned. You used yourself as bait? I had no choice. Her hands clenched. You dragged me into this war, Jean. You said you'd protect me. But you're still playing CEO games with people's lives. His eyes flared. And you risked your life saving mine. Don't act like you don't understand what it means to sacrifice. That shut her up, but only for a moment. I risked my life because it was the right thing to do, not to prove a point to your enemies. They stood inches apart, fire in both their eyes. The tension between them, raw, electric, snapped like thunder. I'm not your pawn, she said. I never thought you were, he answered, voice quieter now. But I might need you to be my partner. She blinked. I found something, he continued, walking over to a drawer and unlocking a steel box. He pulled out a photo. Old. Faded. 2 children in traditional martial garb. One had her smile. The other had his father's eyes. Xiao Lan's breath caught. That's me. And the boy is me, he confirmed. We trained in the same academy when we were kids. My father partnered with your father. He was head of security for the Rouet family for 2 decades. Her stomach dropped. My father died when I was 9, she whispered. I never knew why. Jin's eyes softened with guilt. Because he found out about the embezzlement happening inside the board. And he was silenced. Her legs nearly gave out. She sat down, heart racing. All these years, she murmured. I thought he died in an accident. I didn't remember you at first, Jean confessed. Not until I saw your form, your stance. And then I remembered that photo. My father kept it. Said you'd always protect the people you loved. And you did. She looked at him, eyes filled with something unreadable. So what now? We fight back, he said simply. Together. 2 days later, Rouet International Headquarters. The boardroom was full of wolves. Old men in expensive suits. Younger ones with colder smiles. Jean Rouet entered in full armor, crisp suit, polished shoes, his arms still bandaged beneath the tailored jacket. But this time, he wasn't alone. Xiao Lan stood behind him, hair tied back, fierce in a midnight black blazer. No longer invisible, no longer afraid. This emergency meeting, Jean began, was called because a member of this board attempted to end my life. The room erupted. One man laughed. Jean, surely you aren't serious. But Jean cut him off. Play the footage. Xiao Lan moved to the screen and inserted a drive. Surveillance footage flickered to life. Edited versions of the crash followed by unedited security cam footage recovered from Rouet Villa. The same masked man, now identified as the personal bodyguard of Chairman Du, a longtime board rival. The room went still. I don't care about whispers or rumors anymore, Jean said, voice steady. But you tried to smear the name of the woman who saved me. You painted her a liar. He turned. And then, in front of everyone, he dropped to one knee. The board gasped. Xiao Lan, he said, pulling out a velvet case. You didn't just save my life. You reminded me who I want to be. Not a CEO. Not a puppet. But a man who stands beside someone strong. Someone fearless. Someone like you. The case opened. Inside, a simple platinum ring. Beside a printed vault certificate. Access to 10 billion yuan in inheritance stock. The room erupted in whispers. Xiao Lan stared at him, frozen. You're insane, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Probably. Get up. Not until you say yes. The boardroom was frozen in stunned silence. Jean Rouet, the notoriously untouchable CEO of Rouet International, was kneeling, in front of a girl from the slums. Not with a simple ring, but with a declaration, a vault certificate, and 10 billion reasons that screamed to the world. She's the one. And Xiaolan? She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Her heart was pounding too loud to think. Behind her, a dozen board members stared at her like she was either a threat or a fairy tale. Somewhere in the corner, Chairman Du had gone ghost pale. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. I know, Jean replied, still on one knee, his voice quiet and full of weight. I'm not buying you, Xiaolan. I'm begging for the chance to stand beside the woman who's braver than this entire room put together. Her eyes glistened. She glanced at the board, men who saw her as a stain on their empire. Men who had once tried to erase Jean from existence. The irony of being proposed to in front of them wasn't lost on her. But the stakes weren't romantic anymore. This was war. She slowly reached out and closed the ring box. A collective gasp echoed. Jin's lips parted, surprised, but she leaned down until their eyes were level, voice steady and low. You don't need to kneel for me to believe in you, she said. But I'm not saying yes. Not here. Not like this. Then she helped him to his feet. He straightened, and for a moment, something even more powerful than victory filled his eyes. Respect. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the boardroom. And the entire building buzzed in her wake. Later that night, Rouet Villa. Rain pelted the windows, but the fire crackled warmly inside. Xiao Lan sat by the hearth, legs folded beneath her, hands wrapped around a cup of chrysanthemum tea. Jean Rouet stood by the piano, eyes on her, but not saying a word. Finally, she broke the silence. You're bold, I'll give you that. He gave a faint smile. You handled the board like a general. She smirked. They looked like they'd seen a ghost. You were the ghost, he replied. Of their conscience. Xiao Lan looked into her tea. Why now, Jean? The proposal. The kneeling. The 10 billion. Was it strategy or was it real? He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. Do you think I'd risk turning every man in that room against me for strategy? I think you're capable of anything, she said softly. And that scares me. He knelt again, not in proposal, but to meet her eyes. Xiao Lan, the moment you dragged me out of that fire, you became the only person in my life who ever looked at me without expecting something in return. Not money, not status, not favors, just life. Her gaze flickered, but she said nothing. You didn't just save me that night, he added. You reminded me how to live. You reminded me how to fight for something real. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. I've never belonged in your world, Jean. I fight in alleys. You fight in boardrooms. But we fight for the same thing, he said. Truth. Justice. A future we can control. He reached for her hand, not forcefully, just open, and she placed hers in his. I'm not ready to say yes, she whispered, but I'm ready to stay. And for the first time, Jean Rouet exhaled in relief. 3 days later, Rouet International Security Archives. They reviewed hours of footage. Passwords. Phone taps. Old letters from Jean Rouet's father hidden deep in digital safes. One letter caught Xiaolan's eye. Her father's name. A note attached to it. If anything happens to me, the child of Jianlan will protect you. Her breath hitched. Jianlan, she murmured. That's my father. Jean Rouet looked at her. He knew this would come full circle. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The system glitched. Then, a red alert. Breach detected. Sector C. Jin's face turned cold. They're trying again. But this time, Xiaolan was already moving. She turned toward the security monitors, hands flying over the control panel. I can reroute them, she said. Trap them in the lower wing. But I need 5 minutes. Jean pulled out his phone. I'll stall them. No, she said, locking eyes with him. We stall them together. The hum of the servers pulsed like a heartbeat. Red warning lights flashed through the darkened security archives as Xiaolan's fingers flew over the touchscreen. Her eyes locked on the heat maps. 3 intruders. Fast, moving toward the central vault. They're bypassing standard security, she muttered. They've done this before. Jean Rouet stood beside her, jaw tense. Then this isn't just an attack, it's a final play. He tapped his earpiece. Divert security to exits. Lock down every floor above us. No one gets out. Xiaolan exhaled sharply. I can reroute the blast doors. If I time it right, we trap them in the vault chamber. But, her voice dropped. It locks us in two. For a second, silence. Jean reached out and tilted her chin up. Do it. She froze. What if we don't get out? Then at least we finish this together. The corridor leading to the vault glowed cold and blue, lined with reinforced steel and blinking surveillance lenses. Footsteps echoed. Fast, calculated. Masked men with suppressed weapons crept forward, unaware that every camera was watching. Every move recorded. In the control room, Xiaolan traced their movements. Her heart pounded, but her hands never shook. They're at Junction 7, she said. 30 seconds until breach. Jean checked his watch. Seal the last door on my mark. She glanced at him. You're going in? They won't surrender unless they see me. She caught his wrist. You're not bulletproof. His eyes were unreadable. No. But I've never had someone worth dying for, until now. Before she could reply, he was gone. Inside the vault corridor, Jean stepped into the narrow hall like a man walking into fire. The intruders saw him instantly, guns raised, nerves taut. Jean Rouet, one hissed, voice muffled behind his mask. Didn't think you'd come in person. I don't hide behind shadows, Jean said coolly. Unlike cowards who send mercenaries to clean up their dirty secrets. You're not walking out of here, another man snarled. Neither are you. Behind him, the blast doors slammed shut. Boom. Metal locked into place. Panic flared in their eyes. Then, gasps. From the walls, high-pitched sirens and recording lights flickered. You're live, Jean said. This entire encounter's being broadcast to my cloud. Even if I die, your faces and confessions will outlive you. You think you're smart? The leader barked. You think this makes you invincible? No, Jean said. Then turned slightly. But she is. The side wall exploded inward with a deafening crack. Smoke billowed. And through it, Xiaolan appeared. In all black, eyes blazing. She moved like a shadow, spinning low, sweeping 2 men to the floor. Her palm struck the 3rd square in the chest, sending him crashing against the steel door. Gunfire erupted, but Jean was already moving, shielding her with his body, tackling a 4th man behind the fallen crew. In 90 seconds, it was over. Breathing hard, Xiaolan turned to him. You said they wouldn't surrender, she panted. I was wrong, Jean said, wiping blood from his lip. They just didn't know you were coming. Later that night, rooftop, Rouet Villa. Rain had passed, but the sky still wept silver mist across the sleeping city. Jean Rouet leaned on the balcony railing, a cut on his brow, the corner of his shirt ripped. He looked like a man who had survived a war and didn't regret a single moment of it. Xiaolan joined him silently, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. I always thought strength meant building walls, he said quietly. But you, he turned to her. You knocked them down.
She didn't speak.
Just looked at him. I don't want to be that man anymore, he continued. The one who hides behind power. I want to be a man who deserves you. Her voice was soft. Then stop kneeling. Start standing. He reached into his coat. Not for a ring this time, but a small jade pendant, faded with age. This was your father's, he said. My father gave it to mine after they forged their oath. I found it in the vault. I think it was meant for you. Xiaolon took it with trembling fingers. I remember this. He said it would keep me safe. It will, Jean said, stepping closer. But not because of the jade. Because of the promise behind it. Their hands touched. Their eyes held. And for once, there were no explosions. No danger. No lies. Just two souls in the quiet.